This week, we got a new Phoenix #1, the second From the Ashes X-Men book out there. And there's a little bit of controversy around this one, especially around the artist. I think it's Alessandro Miracolo. We're going to review this as well as talk about all this controversy with our good friend Doc. Phoenix #1, were you excited?
No, I had very little hope for this book outside of the art. But even then, and I didn't say anything at the time because I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt like I had seen a lot of these panels before. Something felt wrong about it. The Twitter detectives tracked down what it was that I thought felt weird, and it turns out like a large portion of this comic book is swiped from mostly looks like Olivier Coipel, but I think there was a handful of other artists, Stuart Immonen and some others that were also swiped for this book. And then while I was looking into it, somebody made mention of the fact that I guess this artist did the same thing on that terrible White Widow book.
Yeah, and it's too bad because for the most part, I think Phoenix #1 is a perfectly kind of average comic book. I don't think that Stephanie Phillips understands the history of Phoenix and Jean Grey as like a combined entity and separate entities, and the fact that, you know, when Jean Grey came back, it wasn't the same Jean Grey, and they haven't been connected for all this time. So she definitely didn't quite understand the timeline there. But otherwise, it's a perfectly serviceable, I don't know, cosmic comic book where Phoenix is really powerful. So there were a few issues in here, but for Stephanie Phillips, this is probably one of the better things she's ever done. Don't know that I'm going to give it a recommend, but let's wait till we get to the end and hear what Doc has to say. Maybe he can change my mind on this one. Starting out with the art, which is basically the only thing everyone is talking about. Alessandro Miracolo is the artist on here. The art in the book looks perfectly fine, but there are several instances, and I don't think it's like really debatable at this point. When you look at the hands, the way they're constructed versus AVX and Phoenix #1, it's clear that he went up and straight up swiped this stuff from Olivier Coipel.
I remember saying it during when we were looking at that From the Ashes sampler book, that there was inconsistency. Phoenix looked different from panel to panel. I assumed it was just because it was a relatively new-ish artist that I hadn't really heard of before. No, it's just because he's stealing from too many different artists in the same book. So you end up with an incredibly inconsistent style, because one time it's the artist swiping an image of Emma Frost, and the next time it's Storm, and they're all from different artists. So you end up with a very, very inconsistent art style and very inconsistent character representation. I wouldn't be surprised if the roughs were literally just traced, and then all of the rest of it, all the finishes essentially, were done by the inker and colorist, in which case this penciler didn't actually pencil shit. It was just a trace.
Now, a lot of people are upset about this. It sounds like you're upset about it. Alessandro Miracolo is working for Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics owns the art that Olivier Coipel did in House of M and in AVX and the Stuart Immonen stuff that appears to have been potentially swiped or kind of worked off of. And I don't think Marvel has a problem with it. Otherwise, Greg Land wouldn't continue to get work. Salvador LaRocca wouldn't continue to get work. There are plenty of dudes out there that are straight up tracing that Marvel employing.
Greg Land and Salvador LaRocca aren't tracing the art of other artists. Greg Land traces a hell of a lot of porno, but he doesn't trace other artists. Sal LaRocca, he is an actual artist because he can draw. He's just being fucking lazy. And now he's taking photos of action figures posed and tracing those. You know, we've used photo reference and stuff for forever. Even tracing a photo of a skyline is one thing. Tracing the art of another artist is something very, very different. It's not an issue of whether they own it or not and whether there's any liability. The fact is, they're letting him trace the art of another artist, and that artist is not getting paid for essentially reuse of their work that's just remastered or remixed to have a different skin slapped over the frame and features.
So you take great umbrage.
I do. It's one thing when you're tracing photographs, when you're taking a photograph, of your posed action figures and tracing that. Now, do I think that is good or great? No. Do I think that's a very artistic thing to do? Not particularly. I liked old Sal LaRocca art before he started tracing photos of his action figures. The same way that Mike Deodato basically just turned into a 3D model tracer. But honestly, taking a photo is not that fucking hard. Drawing a page like Olivier Coipel is a lot of fucking work. That one panel probably took Olivier 3 to 5 hours to do. That photographer, it took him 3 seconds.
So what do you think should happen? Do you think Marvel should acknowledge this and step away and remove Alessandro from the book?
I think that they should fire him. As an artist, it's insulting to your fellow artists that you're just straight up stealing their work, passing it off as your own, and then you're getting paid and they're not. This guy, for however much he's getting paid, Alessandro, whatever the shit his name is, if he's making 125 or 150 bucks for that page, you know who's not getting paid a regular penciling rate? The guy that originally drew it.
That's the big controversy, obviously, around the art. It's all over out there, and it's certainly got a lot of people up in arms, and certainly detracts from what should be, I think, considered a victory for Stephanie Phillips. It's the first issue. It's not completely boring. I think it's marginally well constructed. Like, we've got the weird thing about this book, the real thing that as far as the writing, I think that doesn't work, is the narrator itself is not Phoenix or another cosmic entity. It's just like, I think he's maybe some type of priest kid. And I don't really care about his perspective or point of view of Phoenix at all. So it was a bit of a chore to get kind of through it and to listen to all this narration going on from a point of view and a character that I think doesn't provide anything unique about Phoenix or anything anybody wanted to read. So when she shows up on his planet and everyone's scared of her and she's like, your star's about to go supernova, I'm going to go fix it for you. I think it was supposed to be like this big like hero moment for her, and the narration didn't back that up.
No, not at all. I'd say 90% of the words in this book are the narrator. The main character of this comic is, again, and this is something that is common for a lot of these creators. They're not interested in writing the title character of the comic. They're interested in creating some everyman jabroni character that becomes the main character of the comic. That's what she wants to write. But the fact is that doesn't fucking sell. So she still writes what she wants to write, slaps the Phoenix logo on there, has the Phoenix show up for a couple of panels and do amazing things, not be challenged whatsoever. But the entire story is actually about Jabroni Boy.
So she fixes the sun without any problems whatsoever, saves the planet. They all realize she's not a bad guy. And then there's like a weird moment in here, and they kind of hinted at it in the Tom Brevoort interviews and stuff, that Scott was still going to be a part of the book. But they're like telepathically like sexting, making him feel warm in his nether regions and stuff while they're having this conversation about how amazing she is. And it was just really strange.
Yeah, it really was. But that's exactly what I expect out of a Stephanie Phillips book. It seems like just a way to eliminate a criticism. You know, Jean was dead. The last big moment she had was her dying back in Fall of X. And then she gets brought back and immediately goes off on her own.
I just want Scott to have somebody better. He deserves somebody better than Jean Grey. She doesn't even appreciate him anymore.
I kind of want him to get back with Emma. It's just not fun. It's not good. She's not writing a thing she wants to write. The thing that she wants to write is the thing that doesn't sell. The thing anybody wanted to read about a Phoenix book, she's not going to tell us that story. The best we're going to get on displays of power is when she's going to fucking space ballet around in order to stabilize a black hole.
Well, you mentioned it. That's like, I guess, the other big moment. She's interrupted from sexting telepathically with Scott because Nova needs some help. And because they've got this penal colony that somehow they built inside of a black hole, which seems like a bad idea. And they're about to be taken into the Event Horizon or whatever. And so she shows up and they've got to save the prisoners because they're the good guys. And it makes sense. And then she dances with the black hole and stabilizes it while Nova gets knocked around and a few really high profile, dangerous villains escape. It's narrated by a character that would never ever have any clue that this even happened, because he's still on the planet she just saved and he's not a fucking superhero. And he wasn't a prisoner on the thing, and it's not by Nova. Like, I don't even know how he knows how to describe what she did.
Unless he's just telling her story later, and this is all
What is she, a
giant
fucking braggart?
flashback?
She's out there humble bragging?
I guess. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, it's because she decided to give over the Phoenix to random jabroni boy number 1. And we'll find that out around issue 6 when this book is canceled. There's no explanation for how this narrator knows this. At no point does it even make sense that the narrator would know any of this. Look, this is one of like 10 instances of head scratching bullshit. If they built the prison inside of a black hole, then it's already past the event horizon.
Why would they build a prison right outside the black hole, not expecting it to be taken in, considering it's consuming everything?
I guess to prevent people from being able to escape. But if you have the technology to keep a prison station right outside the event horizon, then obviously things need to be able to come to or from it.
I get the strategery.
Yeah.
But I don't get why you would do it or how you could do it.
No, I don't either, because if you have it far enough away that you can even relatively easily come to and from it, your strategy in placing it there has backfired. It doesn't actually work. If you place it inside, then you're already getting sucked in, and now it's just a matter of time until you're dead. Maybe I'm just being way too critical of this, and I should at least accept the kind of rule of cool, except for the fact that this isn't even really that cool because I've seen it happen like 10 times. Is it really cool like the 14th time that somebody uses this exact same story trope? It's not. It's just boring.
I guess the big thing that comes out of that, besides her dancing with the black hole and stabilizing it and saving the penal colony, is Pericus escapes, and he's defeated Thor in the past, and he lands on the first planet that she saved, where this little boy is, and I think maybe he's the first one that comes in contact with him. So obviously that's going to be like the big villain. I'm not upset about seeing Pericus in here or whatever, but then the last page with like the Black Order in Starjammers.
Yeah, I don't understand why Corsair would be like, yeah, sure, this makes sense. What, is Thanos suddenly the new gonna be the big bad? Because what we really needed after the last person, Tinny Howard, to have a major hand in Thanos is for Stephanie, the other generic Stephanie, to get a hand at it. Now, there was a bonus scene. I feel like this is going to be like the thing for all of the X books, that there's going to be that QR code. If we go back to the rise and fall of the Shi'ar Empire, when Xavier took that whole team out with Rachel and them, there was this dude that Rachel ended up hooking up with that had this fucking big sword that kind of looked like Cloud's sword from Final Fantasy VII. Now it's some chick with braided dreadlocks that looks like she's gold that has that sword. And that sword is somehow imbued with like an ember of the Phoenix.
That's our review of Phoenix #1 from Stephanie Phillips and Alessandro Miracolo, that is embroiled in controversy. And it's too bad, Doc, because as far as Stephanie Phillips goes, this is probably the best start she's had for like a mainstream, decent character, maybe in her career.
That Howling Commandos book wasn't that bad.
Yeah, but that was completely niche. It wasn't even, that's not even really Captain America. It's just like something that was done like 40 or 50 years ago.
That was probably the least terrible thing. And this is probably next after that.
So it gets difficult grading this one. If there's enough swiped art in a comic book, can you even give the art a score? Or does it have to be 0?
I have to give this 0 because it's not his art. With how many of the key panels in this have been found to be straight up swipes, until every single panel is identified and investigated, I don't know if there's a single panel in here that is actually this artist's art.
I'll give it a 1.5 out of 5, 3 out of 10. If the art was able to count in there, it probably would have been more like a 3.5 out of 5, 7 out of 10. Right on the verge of being a recommend. I don't give it a recommend, but you can certainly find worse stuff out there. I think this is a better issue, taking away the controversy, than X-Men #1.
I think you're not entirely wrong. I'd say that this is probably a 1 out of 5, 0.5 out of 5, something like that. I'm not giving you any credit. So as a comic book, I don't actually even consider this a comic book. It's a bunch of narration bubbles with not the main character. So it gets 0.5 from me.
Diverging opinions and scores, certainly on Phoenix #1, a comic book that's causing a lot of upheaval out on the Twitter sphere. If you've seen it or if you haven't seen it, it's definitely out there. I do want to say thank you very much to Doc and everyone for joining us today for this comic book review, the worst of the week. Phoenix #1, a book that's better than I anticipated it would be. Unfortunately, there is some swiping controversy out there. If you would like the full review of this, we went about 30 minutes, actually, because Doc loves his X-Men so much. We're going to edit it down here on YouTube, but if you want the full unedited review, you got to go to Think Critical Patreon. You'll also get the full unedited conversation about continuity and why it's so important. There's a link to the Patreon in the video description.